So as people are watching the election results come in tonight, there of course will be a lot of speculation about who will win. So how can people know who to trust for that information?
Well, you should always go to trusted sources that are traditional sources tend to be better. Public radio and television, the major networks, major um, nationwide newspapers are good for information. What you want to shy away from is any sort of brand new sources that are online or ones that we know that are affiliated with some misinformation. A lot of times it feels good to go to those really partisan sources, but they can also really mislead you.
Right, and we've seen a lot of disinformation this election season. We saw a lot back in 2016 and before that election. So when it comes to social media, Facebook, things like that, do you think things need to change? Are people already learning how to spot misinformation? What do you think we need to know going forward?
We made some good progress in terms of awareness, at least, right? Like a lot of people understand that there is going to be disinformation and that it's something to watch out for. A lot of media organizations are pointing it out. The social media companies have instituted some measures really late. I mean, too late in the game to really make as much of a difference as we'd like. But going forward, maybe they'll start to take it more seriously. I guess it sort of depends on if we start to see more information coming out about disinformation than we know right now. But, I feel some confidence that we are starting to understand it at least. Nevertheless, we're very subject to it. Just psychologically, human beings are subject to disinformation. And there are a lot of malevolent forces out there that know that and that know how to push our buttons.
Kim, it seems like everybody's polarized these days. What would you say to people who feel like they just can't understand the other side?
That's a tough one right now. It's the case that we really do have different points of view on a lot of our core values, but it's also the case that we're sometimes getting information that's not as well balanced or as informative as it could be. And part of the disconnect between people is that misinformation. It's media bubbles that are misleading. And in some cases, we may agree far more than we think we do. It's just that our media sources are warping our view of the world.
Yeah, no. Well, let's hope that we all can find some common ground after this election. All right. Thank you, Kim Nelder, Director of the Project for an Informed Electorate, for joining us tonight. So several cities in our area are voting on mayors this election. One of the biggest races is in Stockton. ABC 10's Kurt Rivera is live with a look at the mayoral race there and voting in San Joaquin County. Kurt, bring us up to speed.
Yeah, Mike, it's been a pretty robust turnout here in San Joaquin County. A lot of people turning out at the polls like they are across the country. They're doing so here in San Joaquin County. A staggering 46% of registered voters have already cast their ballots here in San Joaquin County. You compare that with 68% for the last presidential election. So a lot of people casting ballots. In fact, about 180,000 people casting ballots. Again, that's about half of the registered voters here in San Joaquin County. Now, the Registrar of Voters, Melinda Dubroff, saying that the lines that we've been seeing around the county at different voting centers appear to be long in some locations. That's because of all the social distancing protocol. And speaking of that, one of the problems that happened this morning that the county registrar learned about was one of their poll workers in Escalon at a voting center there came down with COVID. She learned about that about 6 this morning. 16 other staff members also were around that poll worker. They were all sent home to be quarantined. 16 more workers then had to be called in. Now get this, about 200 people who had come there to vote may have been exposed, as well as 50 people that just dropped off ballots. So the pretty scary situation in Escalon. One of the big reasons people are turning out, especially obviously in Stockton, for the mayor of Stockton. That race pits Michael Tubbs, the incumbent, looking for another seat on the council here against Kevin Lincoln, his challenger, who is a pastor here in Stockton. That could be a very close race. We won't know anything as far as results here in San Joaquin County until about 8:30 tonight. That's when all the mail-in ballots will be counted, and then the in-person ballots will start to be counted at 9 o'clock, and then all the results from all the voting centers, which there are about 34 across the county. We're talking about places like in Escalon, Manteca, Lodi, and so forth here in San Joaquin County. Those will all come in here by courier, and they will be counted as well. So again, about half the votes have already been counted here, but they won't be released, of course, until around 8:30 tonight, Mike.
Kurt, of course, you've had your finger on the pulse of what's going on there on the ground. What issues do you think are most important to voters there?
Well, I think easily across the board, we're talking about the homelessness problem here in Stockton, across San Joaquin County, like in places around the area, around the region here in Northern California, across the country, really. But homelessness is a big issue here in Stockton. Both Mayor Tubbs and Kevin Lincoln were talking about that, about their plans. They each have a plan, they say, in place to turn the situation around in Stockton. The other issue we're talking about is crime in Stockton. Stockton has, unfortunately, a reputation for crime that has gone up. With the amount of homicides, they are up this year dramatically. But the police chief here in Stockton attributes that to a lot of domestic violence issues. And unfortunately, because of the pandemic, that has played a part in the homicides as well. So we're talking about homelessness issues here in Stockton as well as crime. That is paramount to voters here tonight.
Kurt, I wanted to ask you, when it comes to the pandemic, have you noticed an effect on the way people are voting there?
Well, you know, they're requiring masks here at the administration building. They're requiring masks when you go into the voting centers. And interestingly enough, and I haven't talked to the registrar of voters here about this, when I went inside there just to see how the turnout is with folks here downtown, they had a sign up saying if you are not wearing a mask, if you are a maskless voter, that you need to go upstairs to cast your ballot. So you could cast down your ballot downstairs as well as upstairs. But they are very strict with the protocols, though. So it's interesting that in Escalon you had that poll worker that came down with COVID when they have all those social distance protocols as well as all the cleaning. The registrar of voters, Melinda Duboff, telling us that they instituted that, made sure everything was spotless, clean, but still, who knows how she came down with COVID, according to the registrar of voters, when they did everything they were supposed to do. So you got the people wearing masks, you got the cleaning protocol in place and social distancing. So they're very strict on that.
Yeah, well, that's definitely just a microcosm of what's happening around the rest of the country. All right, Kurt Rivera with us from Stockton tonight. We'll check him back with you a little bit later in the show. All right, thank you, Kurt. No election results yet here in California, as the polls are still open for at least another 15 minutes. But we are getting some national numbers. So let's check in now with ABC 10's Brandon Ritteman, who's tracking the election results with our new interactive map. Good evening, Brandon.
Hey, Mike, how are you? Yeah, we're taking a look right now. What we're showing you here are states called by the Associated Press. That's the standard we've gone with for our map. So these are not partial totals that are coming in. You can find some of the states that are leaning if you see these ones in white right here. The reason Nebraska shows up in gray right here is because it actually has a split among its congressional districts, so they're not all in at this time. But the two that are in red so far. One of the interesting things I think about this national map, though, that I think we could talk about is if we just take you back to 2016, this is the lay of the land in the Trump-Clinton race. And if I just could call your attention, because a lot of the focus so far tonight has been over here by virtue of the fact that East Coast time hits first, just go ahead and draw a line east to west across the country and look west of the Mississippi at what happens when I take you back to 2012. And then back to 2008. And you'll see there's virtually no change except for one of those splits in Nebraska. The West has been sort of a locked-in chunk of electoral votes for quite some time in this country. So one of the things we'll be watching out here on the Best Coast is whether that changes. And the place where Democrats feel like they have the most chance to do that is the state of Arizona with its 11 electoral votes. That could end up being a deciding factor in who becomes president at the end of this election, potentially, depending on what happens over east of the Mississippi. So something to be watching tonight. I can also show you, this is 538's projection, which at the moment, if I compare that to the current results, does not look like we have flips at that on any of those states at this point, but we do have several states that have not come in that are colored in blue. So if you're Team Biden right now, you're watching that with great interest. I'll go ahead and bop over to California, even though we don't have any results coming in just yet. And I can give you a preview of what we'll be able to show you later tonight. I'll just take you back to 2016 right here. Excuse me. with the Trump-Clinton race. Not only can we show you the counties that went for Trump and Clinton, and we can zoom in on this map too all night long, but we can show you by how much. And so as California's results are coming in tonight, this is the sort of thing that we'll be able to show you. We can kind of adjust the contrast here and give you a sense of MAGAfornia versus blue California, if you will. We'll be looking for flips all throughout there as well. Back to our blank page, though, again, we don't have anything coming in just now, but I do want to just sort of talk through, Mike, if we could, some of the props that we'll be watching. As you know, I put together the station's explainers for all 12 of these, trying to help people make sense of what a yes and no vote means. What we didn't talk about in that series is which ones maybe have the most impact. So there are really 4 that I would argue are the highest impact, and those start here with Prop 15. There we go. Again, there's no results coming in, but this is the business property tax increase. The reason I think that we all need to watch this one right now, in a normal year, it would be interesting anyway. This is sort of viewed by opponents of taxation as a slippery slope to the end of Prop 13. It doesn't affect your home property taxes. It does affect businesses, and that's kind of the point. If you've driven through a strip mall lately, if you've driven through a office park lately, you have probably noticed a lot of for lease signs, and the businesses that maybe you are familiar with have been struggling because they got some support early on in the pandemic and then not so much. So the question tonight is, what are Californians going to make of this proposal as they look at the current lay of the land? Sort of the political wisdom right now is that maybe it'll have a tough time due to COVID, but we'll be watching to see if that comes into fruition. Prop 16 is the one that you see. I've seen yes or no signs all over every on-ramp to every highway around town about this one, because this is sort of the gut check on racial inequality question. Right now, California has equality built into our state laws. It's baked in there because the voters put it there. You're not allowed to discriminate based on race, religion, and a bunch of other factors, gender being one of them. And that was effectively a ban passed by the voters more than a decade ago on affirmative action. This, Prop 16, would undo it and allow the state to give preference to minorities and women, both in state contracting and the like, but also in college admissions, which is maybe the more emotional side of this, is, you know, who gets into college and what is the criteria for getting there. So again, this is a gut check question. This is a how does California feel the right direction to move forward is on racial inequality, and affirmative action has had historically a tough time here. We can bounce down the list here to Prop 21, which is rent control. Now, this was on your ballot in the midterms just 2 years ago. It's a watered down version of that same question. It does not pass rent control statewide. What it would do is allow your city council to pass more rent controls on more properties. Right now, there's a hard and fast date in state law. This would basically convert that to a 15-year-old property is eligible. So as homes get older, more of them become eligible for rent control versus just this hard and fast line that we have today. I should point out there is sort of a version of statewide rent control, or a cap at least, on how much rent can go up. That's kind of new from last time. How much that sunk in with voters, we really don't know, so this will be one to watch. And then Prop 22 is the one that you've had a piece of mail on every day if you live in the state of California. This is the Uber and Lyft law written by Uber and Lyft. They have been pushing and pushing and pushing to try to solidify in state law in California that their drivers are contractors. And what's really interesting about this is they're trying to get you to overrule the lawmakers you elected to the Capitol in Sacramento, because California passed a law that would make these drivers employees. The companies have refused to go along with it. It has turned into a giant court battle, and this is meant by Uber and Lyft to end that battle and say, no, look, the voters are on our side. So those are the ones we're really watching. I guess if there was one more I'd tack onto the list, it'd be 25. This is the end bail question, and the reason this one's interesting is because it's a referendum. The legislature passed a law to end bail, and a yes vote on Prop 25 would say, we the voters are cool with that, Mike.
And, you know, we've talked about Prop 22. It is, I've heard, the most expensive, not just in California history, but in the country's history. Is that correct?
To my knowledge, it is. And the most interesting thing about that is, you know, this is an industry writing its own laws from whole cloth. and it is sort of an Alamo, if you will, of sorts for Uber and Lyft. They sort of splashed onto the scene by undercutting taxis with better technology and a whole different business model, and this is core to their business model. It literally is life or death to Uber and Lyft. If they fail on this, they have to go back to the drawing board and figure something out, because if their drivers become employees, it's simply just going to make the rides more expensive. That's what it comes down to. And now all of a sudden they're not as competitive with taxis. So it really is, to these businesses, sort of a do or die time. And they have spent money like it is, Mike.
All right, we'll be paying close attention to that prop as polls close in about 7 minutes from now. ABC 10's Brandon Brideman will check back in with you a little bit later.
Thank you.
Keep it here for results from California and the Sacramento region starting after the polls close shortly. But for now, we want to focus on some of those national results. Political analyst Steve Swat joins us live. Steve, good evening.
Good evening. I think the biggest takeaway so far this evening is that if you're a Biden fan and you were hoping for a landslide, it's probably not going to happen. There were a number of early states where they were Trump must-wins. And if you go through them one by one, it looks like he's likely to win them. North Carolina, for example, Joe Biden started ahead with those early votes, but then when the rural parts of North Carolina and the same day voting came in, that has turned in Trump's favor. Also in Ohio, and also in Texas and Florida and Georgia. And so those were 5 states that they were wish states for the Biden campaign, hoping for an early knockout. And right now it is trending against him in all those states. Florida is really interesting because the Biden campaign thought that they had a decent chance in Florida, and it's fairly close, especially because 1/3 of the electorate in Florida are aged 60 and above. And President Trump has struggled with this age group because of the pandemic, of course. These are individuals who are at risk of death if they should get the coronavirus. And also, these are individuals who can compare the Trump presidency to earlier presidencies that they've seen in their lifetime, and decorum seems to matter, and also temperament and demeanor. And so the Biden campaign really thought they had a decent shot at Florida. They are doing well, but they looks like they're going to lose, and probably because they have underperformed in Miami-Dade County, especially with the Cuban vote there. That's in Florida. Now in Texas, they were hoping for a big win, which would be a breakthrough, because these were states that President Trump carried in 2016. But Biden has been underperforming with Latino voters in the state of Texas. And so once the early voting came in, and then we waited for the rural vote to come in, and the same day ballots that were cast today, it seemed like President Trump had taken a lead. A few other things to mention very quickly. We're also looking at the House of Representatives. The entire House is up for grabs. You'll recall 2 years ago, the Democrats picked up 40 seats and flipped the House blue. And they right now have a majority of 35 seats in the House. They are looking to pick up another 10 seats or maybe 15 seats to solidify that margin, and it looks right now that that's probably going to happen. In the U.S. Senate, it's 53 to 47, and you know how important the Senate is in terms of confirming presidential nominations and things like that. They need a net gain in the Senate of 3 seats. And right now, they looks like they've picked up 1 seat in Colorado. They flipped Colorado. They were ahead most of the evening in North Carolina, but the latest numbers I saw showed that the incumbent Republican, Tillis, is heading for a victory, but that's still too close to call. So basically, there you have it. It's still anybody's ball game in terms of the presidential contest, because the 3 most important swing states, which are Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, those are states that couldn't even start processing the early votes until this morning. And those votes will come in late this evening, early tomorrow, and for the next several days. And those are the states we're going to be watching to see where the presidency will head.
Political analyst Steve Swat joining us right now. Steve, I just wanted to ask you, a lot of those northern states that have been considered toss-ups, we don't know where they're going to be in Maybe not tonight.
Right.
When should we expect to know the final results from those states?
Well, Pennsylvania, for example, is considered a key, and the officials in Pennsylvania say they expect to have a good chunk, most of the vote done by Friday. Now, back in June, they held their primary, and it was the first time they held widespread mail-in voting in the primary, and it took 2.5 weeks to finally decide the victors in Pennsylvania. But Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, because they couldn't even process the votes until today, it's going to take several days.
Political analyst Steve Swat joining us. Thanks for being with us. We'll check back in with you later throughout the night. And as I mentioned, there's still time to vote here in California, but you're coming down to the wire. Monica Coleman is tracking the vote for us tonight in Placer County. Monica, what's the latest?
Yeah, Mike, we've got about 3 minutes left till that 8 p.m. deadline, and there's a few voters who are inside here in Rockland at the voting center, casting their ballots, casting that vote, trying to get their votes in before we'll cut off that line at 8 p.m. if anybody tries to come after that deadline. So if you need to cast your ballot, get here as quickly as possible before 8 p.m. so you can drop off that ballot or go inside, register to vote, and vote in person. Back to you, Mike.
All right, Monica, it's interesting to see that there are people there waiting to cut you off if you're there after 8 p.m. But if you get there before 8 p.m., well, your vote's insured because here in California, that's the law. All right, Monica, thank you. And here in California, the polls close in about 10 seconds, so you better sprint if you're not there yet. We are following this race closely, and we'll be back here in just a little bit for another update online, and we'll have L&T at 11 o'clock and a special edition at 1 a.m. Stay with us at ABC 10.
Yes. Hi. Okay. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. Sounds good.
Affected by it. Thousands of those who have been diagnosed or members of their family diagnosed with a pre-existing condition have spoken out, have told their stories, and that was the most compelling argument of all. So again, that was our purpose. We have succeeded in that. Now we have to win the White House, and we're well on our way to doing that. But again, we're speaking to our friends in Virginia. Over 2 million votes have not been counted in Virginia yet, so we're waiting to see what that brings in and what that means for the presidential race. But I'm here just to sing the praises of our House Democrats and our candidates, not just in terms of numbers. It's not just about the quantity. It's about the quality of leadership that they provide for our country. It's about the fact that they are there in the Congress. We're all there for the people, and to have a strategic plan to be successful, to retain our control, to hold the House, actually is how we say it. We couldn't be better served than by our chair, Sherry Bustos. And all of the pillars of winning an election, whether it was the mobilization, the grassroots level, even virtually, she has succeeded. Whether it's about messaging in a very disciplined way, she has succeeded. About amassing the financial resources, the money, the third M, she has broken all records. And through it all, she retained and commanded the respect of the House members and the competence of all of our candidates. So with that, I want to acknowledge again Chair Sherry Bustos of Illinois. Madam Chair, I yield to you with an honor. Thank you.
All right, Speaker Pelosi, thank you so much for your kind words. And obviously your leadership of this caucus, you've been absolutely amazing. I'm joining you tonight from Moline, Illinois, which is my hometown. Moline is kind of the center of America. It's, people here, they take that literally, and they work hard and look after each other. It's around places like this that if your neighbor falls ill, you offer to bring over a meal to them, or you offer to look after their kids. It was in 2018 that Democrats won back the House by reaching out to people in towns like Moline, by listening to them. And here's what people in those towns, the center of America, told us what we took into the 2020 elections. And that's that they want a government that works for them. They want more progress and less partisanship. They want an end to corruption and the power of special interests. And they want health care, period. They want to stop worrying about it. They want to know that their families are covered. And they know in their hearts what Democrats have kept pointing out. Every time Republicans have had the opportunity to strip away the health care protections of hardworking Americans, Republicans have done that. That is a fact. And no matter whether you're a mom suffering through cancer, a dad who survived a heart attack, a young kid struggling with asthma, Republicans will not rest until they rip away the protections that ensure you can still
Yes. Can you hear me? Okay.
You're watching special election night coverage of Your Voice, Your Vote with ABC 10. I'm Mike Duffy. Election results are starting to come in here in California as polls have now closed. As we wait for more election results, we want to talk more about what to expect tonight. Danielle Martin is an associate professor of political science at Sac State, and she joins us now live. Good evening, Danielle.
Thank you. Good evening.
So tell me a little bit, how does this vote counting process work?
Well, we need to be really careful when we're looking at the vote counts at this point because early returns are not a random sample of all the ballots. And so they're not necessarily indicative of the entire voting population. So they may not be good predictions of the final results. So nationally, some states count the mail-in ballots first, other states count the in-person votes that were cast today first. And so these first results that we're seeing really aren't going to be indicative of the winner. We also need to be careful with which results we're looking at. So you'll see some people or some sites are reporting % of precincts reporting. And we really want to be careful with that because it could be misleading this year because there's so many mail-in votes. So you could, for example, see really high percentages of precincts reporting, but that means there still could be hundreds of thousands or even millions of ballots left to count. So you really want to be looking at the % of ballots left to count or % of expected votes. And so really we're going to have to be as patient as possible this evening.
So, of course, people are on pins and needles. How long do you think it'll take before we actually know the winner in some races?
Well, it depends on how competitive they are. The presidential race could come down to a few states that some of them they couldn't even start counting their ballots or pre-processing, excuse me. They couldn't start pre-processing their ballots until today. So it could be days or, even a week or so. In California, we can accept ballots that are received up until November 20th. So if some races are close, we might have to wait until after November 20th to get any official election results. So it really just depends on how competitive the race is.
Okay, political science professor Danielle Martin, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So we expect a lot more results in the next half hour as more counties report in. You can keep an eye on some of those results in the box to my right here. If we can just move a little bit ahead, here in California, there are no big statewide offices up for re-election this year, but we are watching the results on 12 statewide propositions that cover topics like affirmative action, jail time, property taxes, and how to classify drivers for rideshare companies like Uber and Lyft. We'll also be watching some congressional races and mayoral races. You can see some of those results in the ticker at the bottom of your screen. But right now, we want to bring in Mary Beth Moylan, the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs and Experiential Learning at University of the Pacific McGeorge School of Law. Thanks for joining us, Mary Beth. Mary Beth, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah. Thank you for joining us. Yeah. So we've already seen several legal challenges related to this election and some candidates raising the possibility of more. What legal issues could we see in the coming days?
Well, I think that there was actually another lawsuit filed today in Pennsylvania. That one had to do with absentee ballots and whether or not voters who voted by mail were allowed to cure a defect in their ballot. So there's one county in particular that was allowing Pennsylvania voters to cure defects if they had been alerted to them prior to Election Day. So there's a lawsuit attempting to enjoin that practice that's happening in Pennsylvania. There's another lawsuit involving the Pennsylvania mail-in ballots. We have already seen some litigation in Texas and North Carolina, and I think it's entirely possible that there could be more litigation in the coming days. We do have a number of states, in particular the swing states, that have that do accept mail-in ballots as long as they've been postmarked by Election Day. So as your prior guest was saying, really, we need to be really patient, and it's hard to be patient, but there are votes that have already been cast that are on their way to polling places, and until all the votes are counted, it is going to be hard to know. And in some instances, when the litigation is over and we know which ballots are allowed to be counted, at that point, we'll get a result.
So a lot of election issues are related to state laws. Are there federal cases to be made with the way that the states hold elections or count votes?
So we have a very interesting country, this country of ours, in that all of our states really do have different rules and different laws relating to the way they conduct elections. Even within a state, from county to county, you can have differences in the ways in which we vote, in the ways in which the ballots get processed. So there really isn't a consistent rule across all 50 of our states in terms of how ballots will be counted or how elections will be run. Some people think that's a really great strength, that we have a lot of uniqueness in all of our states. Some might argue that it would be sure nice if we could have some consistent rules that we all would play by, especially in national elections, where we are all voting for the same office holder.
It might make things nice. Appreciate it. Thanks, Mary Beth, for joining us. A lot more election results are coming in right now here in California. I'll be back with more analysis later. But for now, I want to give you a look at more of the results. 45 minutes have now passed here in California, and the results are coming in. Thanks for joining us. I'm Mike Duffy. We want to focus right now on some Sacramento races. Christina Flores-Victor is an assistant professor of political science at Sac State, and she joins us now. Thanks for being with us.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
So I just wanted to ask you, is there anything that surprised you about the results in Sacramento so far?
Not too much. Measure A and Measure C both like they're headed for defeat.
Okay, and how about the Sacramento City Council and the strong mayor measure? That's Measure A that you were just referencing, correct?
Yes. So for City Council, that is actually somewhat surprising that incumbent Alan Warren looks like that he might be trailing the challenger. So that is a bit unusual for an incumbent to lose the seat, but there are not, obviously all of the votes aren't in right now, so that would be a little premature to call it. But that would be a little bit unusual. In the other race for District 8, they're very close, so it's too hard to say yet, right?
Right. And now a lot of people were confused about Measure A in general. Even the wording of it was a little bit hard for some people to understand. Do you think that tonight's results will change the way that Sacramento is run?
No, I don't think so. I think one of the things that maybe was confusing about Measure A is that it was called the Mayoral Accountability Act. And in fact, I'm not sure that it did a lot to increase accountability for the mayor, the position of the mayor. It actually kind of gave them more power. So that might have been something that was a little bit confusing about that particular act. But Sacramento has voted multiple times on this kind of so-called strong mayor initiative. And so it might not be surprising that even though people might have been a little bit confused, that the undecideds broke on the no side of that particular measure.
Yeah, no, and there's a lot of issues that people are still talking about. Unfortunately, we're out of time at the moment, but thanks for joining us, Christina Flores-Victor. We appreciate your time. I'll be back in about 15 minutes with more analysis, but right now we want to bring you more results that are coming in. Stay with us.
And good evening. Thanks for joining our special election night coverage here on ABC 10. I'm Madison Wade. Polls in California closed just about an hour ago and results are rolling in. ABC 10's Van 2 is tracking several races in Sacramento tonight. Van.
Well, Madison, keep in mind that it will be weeks before the final vote is certified. So let's start here with District 2. Incumbent Councilmember Alan Warren, who grew up in Del Paso Heights, vying for a third term here. He has held that position since 2012, and he's challenged by Viva Supermarkets owner Sean Laloe, who looks like he's setting the stage for an upset here, leading in the count so far by 500 votes, 53 of the ballots counted so far. We're also following Measure C. A yes vote would create a new independent rent control board, and the count showing Sacramento voters rejecting the measure by 62%. And finally, Measure A, better known as the Strong Mayor Act, 57% voting no and 42% voting yes in the first release of ballots from mail-in ballots. Now, we will have reaction from the mayor and opponents to this measure later on tonight.
Van, thank you. Of course, we are following that very closely, and these are some results of other results we've been following. Sacramento Council District 8, Councilmember District 8, Les Simmons versus Mai Vang. Very close right here. You're seeing it is split 50-50. We will have much more news coming up throughout the night.
Welcome back to special election night coverage of and I'm Mike Duffy. We're tracking results from across California and in the Sacramento area with this map to my right, as well as the ticker at the bottom of your screen. We'll also be checking in with political experts and ABC 10 correspondents to understand the results. Let's now talk about returns and vote count. Paul Mitchell is the Vice President for Political Data, Inc., and he joins us live now. Good evening, Paul.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So how do you think that the turnout's been in California so far this election?
Well, turnout has been extraordinary. As of this morning, we're at 13 million votes cast, and the state record is only 14.6 million. That was the 2016 election. So we're going to just blast right past that, and it's going to be the largest turnout the state's ever seen.
And it's now been a little over an hour since those polls closed. How many updates do you think that we can get tonight?
Well, we're going to get a lot of updates. Generally, what happens is the first votes that actually get posted, they're traditionally called the 801s because they come in right after the polls close at 8 o'clock. And we'll probably see those votes coming in for about an hour, and those are votes that are largely votes that were cast by mail or at the drop boxes. The second wave we'll see will be later tonight, and that will be votes of people who actually went to the polls and voted in person. And we saw in the data that a lot of the more Democratic votes were being cast early, and a lot more of the Republican votes were being done in person. So we might see that contribute to some shifts. Most counties then will be receiving all the ballots that were dropped off at drop boxes today and dropped off at polling places today. And most counties will go and start working through those starting tomorrow and maybe start reporting those on Friday or later in the week. The one exception will be Orange County, which says that they're going to process every ballot that they had on hand as of 8 o'clock tonight. And they're going to do it before midnight.
All right, so it sounds like we could expect waiting in most of the state, but we did see record early voting. Is this a trend that you think will continue into the future?
Well, it might happen that a lot of voters who get the experience of voting by mail in this election decide that, yeah, hey, I want to vote by mail in the future. It's already a trend where 75% of the people registering to vote nowadays opt in to voting by mail. And then as we remember in Sacramento in 2018, we voted by mail, just like we did in this election, with every voter in Sacramento County getting a ballot. But in other nearby counties, like in Yolo County, they were sticking to a more traditional system. We might see more people wanting to do this if they find it more convenient. What we might not see again is the same exact pattern with Democrats being the ones that rush to turn in their ballots so quickly and Republicans being the ones that want to vote at the polls. That aberration seems to be just because of the messaging that was happening in this particular election.
All right, well, it will be interesting to see what happens going forward. Paul Mitchell, thanks for being with us. ABC 10's Brandon Ritteman, who's tracking the election results with our new interactive maps. What are you seeing, Brandon?
Hey, Mike, how's it going? So we're taking a look at the statewide presidential result. Obviously, California expected to go for Joe Biden, so no surprise there. We are, however, seeing some of the counties that were red last time apparently flipping to blue, although it is early in the evening. Closer to home, though, we have a couple of House races that we're watching, particularly this one. Tom McClintock, the incumbent Republican, up against Bryn Kennedy. This race is still relatively close, and we can actually show you what this one looked like last year as well. So you can see a little bit of a difference in the colors on the map, but votes still coming in here. We're only at about 80% of the expected vote on this one. So this is going to be one worth watching, but right now, Tom McClintock looking relatively safe. If we go down to the pickup that Democrats had, though, in the Modesto area from last time in the midterms, you can see Josh Harder is handily winning. This was a race that really fizzled out. Ted Howes really wasn't able to mount much of a challenge to Josh Harder, and this race did not become the close one that we expected that it might. That is bearing out here on the maps. We're going to go to the props, and I just want to drill down on some of the more noteworthy ones because there's 12, as you know, if you filled out a ballot. Prop 15 is oh, this has flipped since the last time I looked at it. This was narrowly squeaking by. Again, you can see there's a lot of the state left to come in and only about a third of the anticipated vote coming in. This would be a business property tax increase in the middle of a pandemic. So a lot of small businesses watching this one with great interest, particularly those who might own their buildings. Then we go to Prop 16, affirmative action. This one appears to be in rough shape, but again, the night is young, but down by more than a few points at this time. We'll go on to Prop 21, another noteworthy one. This is another stab at expanding rent control that appears to be headed for a solid defeat in the state of California. We'll continue watching it. And then Prop 22, an even solider defeat potentially on this one. This is the Uber and Lyft law that was written by Uber and Lyft. If you live in the state of California, you've had at least 1 to 6 postcards maybe in your mail every day for the last month about this one, because this is the big money ballot question. Appears to be headed for defeat, but I will note San Francisco, the headquarters of Uber, has not come in just yet. So definitely one to keep watching, but does not look good for Uber and Lyft tonight on this law that they wanted to try to solidify their business model.
All right, Brandon, a lot to keep track of, and we'll keep checking in with you as more results come in. For now, she's been talking with voters tonight. Monica, what's the narrative you've been hearing?
Yeah, Mike, I got to talk to the last voters that got to cast their vote here. Now the shop is closed up, the doors are locked, the lights are off, and poll workers have gone home. All that's left is the social distancing markers on the ground here that were reminding voters to stay 6 feet apart. But I did get to speak to the last voters here, and they told me that they came out to vote because of a Reeboks commercial, Mike. He said that he saw that Reeboks commercial and it really hit him, that his vote will affect other people in this lifetime. And then also his wife said that she was a first-time voter and they were the last ones to come vote. They said they were just really busy parents who have a small business and that they could only squeeze in the time to vote today around the last hour, but they wanted to make sure that their vote was counted this evening. But I want to talk about earlier today, and it was really busy at the ballot drop-off drive-by all the way over to across the street. People weren't even coming up here to vote in person. They were going to that ballot drop-off box all the way across the street, just drive up, drop off their ballot, and they could go home. So that was really popular. There's only 6 of those ballot drop-off boxes here in Placer County. But when it came to how many people actually came out to vote on election day, election officials telling me that 187,000 people had already voted. So it wasn't a huge turnout, but they did have a lot of people come out and exercise that right to vote. Mike?
All right, Monica, thanks for the update. And let's turn now to Giacomo Luca. He's been covering the vote in Elk Grove tonight, where the city is voting on the mayoral race, I should say. Giacomo, what have you learned?
Well, Mike, in the last half hour or so, we saw those votes after the the polls closed here. Those votes being picked up and brought to the Sacramento County election offices. Certainly lots of folks in this area waiting for those results to come in any time now. We are reporting, we do have some information on that race, specifically this Elk Grove mayoral race, which has been quite contentious, perhaps one of the most contentious in our region, just because of some of the mudslinging that has kind of gone around, something a little uncanny for a mayoral race for a city of this size. But right now we can report that Bobby Singh Allen, the school board trustee running for mayor, is leading right now with 19,358. That's compared to Steve Lee, that's the mayoral incumbent, who has 14,270. But that's only 40,000 votes being reported. There's roughly 105,000 registered voters in Elk Grove, so certainly a lot more votes to be counted. And I did contact one of the campaigns, and of course no one's ready to call this race just yet because there's just way too many votes still out there, but we're hoping for some more updates within the next couple of hours. Mike?
Track of those. Thank you, Giacomo. And let's talk more about the national election results and the impact of them on California. Political analyst Steve Swat is back live with us. Steve, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
So let's talk about the presidential race here. Polls are now closed on the West Coast. What are your takeaways?
Yep. Well, first of all, there were some must-win states for Donald Trump, and it appears that he's winning those states, although they all have not been called yet. Ohio has been given to Donald Trump, but Texas and Florida and Georgia, those and North Carolina, where he leads, but he hasn't actually won them yet. Those are must wins for him. What is interesting is that Arizona really trending toward Joe Biden right now. He leads by 8 percentage points, and that's an important state. It has 11 electoral votes. If he should flip Arizona and then hold on to Nevada, where he is favored, and then wins Michigan and Wisconsin, he would have 170 electoral votes, and he wouldn't even have to win Pennsylvania, which everyone believes is the key tipping point state. So that's pretty interesting. In terms of New Hampshire, which is another one of those interesting states, it looks like Biden has won New Hampshire, but that was a close one because 4 years ago, Hillary Clinton only won by less than a half percentage point. And right before the election, President Trump went to New Hampshire to try to capture that vote. New Hampshire is so interesting because the leading newspaper, powerful newspaper in that state, is the Manchester Union Leader. And it is very fiery. And I remember in 1980, I was covering Jerry Brown's run for president when he went to New Hampshire. Front page headline in the Manchester Union Leader, very conservative, said, with a picture of Jerry Brown, "The sap is running in New Hampshire." And they called him the California Snowflake. Well, in 100 years, the Manchester Union Leader has never endorsed a Democrat until this election. They called Donald Trump a buffoon, a liar, and a bully. That was really interesting in New Hampshire, and New Hampshire apparently has gone for Joe Biden. So that's really what's going on the national scene right now.
Steve Swett, I'm running out of time, but I just want to ask you, do you think we'll have a presidential winner tonight?
No. The votes in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan will not be in until, and they've already announced that, the election officials, many of those will be in tomorrow or the next day.
All right, we'll have to leave it at that. Thanks so much, Steve, for being with us. We'll be back with more analysis in about 15 minutes. Keep it here for more California election results. And I want to remind you that we'll have a wrap-up of the night's results on LNT at 11 o'clock, along with a live update at 1 a.m. For now, we want to give you a look at more results.
It is election night here on ABC 10. Polls are closed and vote counting is now underway in California. ABC 10's Andy Judson is live inside the Sacramento County Elections Office with an update. Andy.
Hey, Chris. Yeah, we had a whopping 30,000 people vote in person today in Sacramento County, which is a really big number in comparison to the last 10 days, which is only 21,000. And I want to show you, just because those polls have closed doesn't mean that the work isn't over here in the elections office. Dave is hard at work. This is where your ballots come. They call it the Blue Dragon. And this is where they come. They get sorted by precinct. The signatures are photographed and checked here, and they are cut open. We'll be here all night, so we'll continue to provide you all the updates from the elections office. For now, I'm going to send it back to you.
An inside look at the vote counting. Andy, thank you. In the Sacramento City Council District 8 race, Mai Vang and Les Simmons in a very tight race right now. They're trying to fill the seat left open by Councilman Larry Carr. Vang and Simmons both have 50% of the vote right now. ABC 10's Lena Howland is following that race and joins us now live. A tight race, Lena.
Yeah, an extremely tight race. I've been following this very closely and actually just got done with Zoom interviews with both candidates who tell me they are actually feeling both very energized and cautiously optimistic after looking at the first batch of election results. Now, Mai Vang, a 35-year-old daughter of Hmong refugees who sits on the Sacramento City Unified School Board and is actually also a native to South Sacramento, is currently leading the race by only about 50 votes, just to show you how close this race is. Her challenger, Pastor Les Simmons, is a fourth-generation pastor at the South Sacramento Christian Center, and he's been well known for his social justice work. He is trailing Vang by that tight number of votes. Again, this is a very close race, much too close to call right now, but we're expecting to get another update just after 10 tonight. Back to you.
Indeed, and as you keep an eye on ABC's coverage, we are streaming local results and analysis right now. Just go to abc10.com or download the ABC 10 app. We're back shortly.
Washoe County. I think there's 38 or there's 39 of these. These are municipalities, generally larger places that do that sort of separate from the county. And those can come in later in a lot of cases. And I think Milwaukee's going to be one of them.
Steve Kornacki, thank you very much. Let's go to our friend Claire McCaskill, former U.S. Senator from the great state of Missouri, who started off this night quite confident and who has retained the same smile and look of confidence, and of course, over the course of the night, as lots of other people who are Democrats or Democrats have been speaking out. Claire, where do you see? Wow. Oh, yeah, that was a little close.
States that he will flip, and it will all be fine. I'm kind of with James Carville. Everybody chill. Put away the sharp instruments. We're going to be fine. I am more worried about the Senate. Although interestingly, in Montana, I just took a look, and Steve Bullock has the same number of votes as Donald Trump in Montana, with half the vote counted. 6,000 more votes than Joe Biden. Now you say, well, 6,000, that's not that much, but this is Montana. 6,000 is a lot. So the fact that he is running ahead of Joe Biden by that much may break the streak we've seen where these Senate races all fall in line with how people are voting at the top of the ticket.
Claire, first of all, I'm still recovering from my blow against North Carolina, and I hope that North Carolina ends up being the story of the night. I love North Carolina. I really didn't mean to run afoul of anybody in North Carolina. But the fact is that the Biden campaign is in the exact same sort of place and mood that they were in over the weekend, where their number one path to 270 is to resurrect the blue wall of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. That plan not thwarted, not delivered any setback other than needing a little more time. After that, it gets a little more murky. Can you talk about and we should say that would be all they need, especially if Arizona continues to look the way it looks right now. But can you just sort of bring it back to the facts, bring it back to the map?
Well, we were giddy because the map felt like it was expanding. And I think we still have a polling problem in this country. We thought that they had made adjustments and the polling was now absolutely correct. Based on polling, it looked like there were all kinds of different paths we could get there. As it turned out, the one true path is the path that they were most focused on. Give this campaign credit. Joe Biden didn't go to Texas. Everyone was screaming, Joe Biden, go to Texas. Go, Joe Biden, go to Texas. They knew they had to keep their eye on the prize, which were those three states. And those three states.
Us up, but it's trending toward President Trump. Texas is really interesting because it's been changing graphically over the years, and it is now really a legitimate state and not as ruby red as it used to be. And one of the reasons for that is that since 2008, 700,000 Californians have moved to Texas for cheaper housing. A house in Tarrant County costs about 1/3 of what an average house in Los Angeles County costs. And so they have been flooding the suburbs of Fort Worth and Dallas and Houston, and they are turning what used to be red suburbs into purple suburbs. So that's one of the reasons why Texas is still close. It held tonight. It is trending toward President Trump. Same with Florida. That hasn't been called yet, but that looks like perhaps a Trump victory, and also Georgia, although Georgia is still waiting for a flood of votes from Atlanta and environments there. So that's really interesting. The one point which I brought up the last time, I'll bring it up again because it's so important, is that at least Fox News is saying that Arizona is going for Biden, and they've called it for Biden. And if that happens, and if Biden wins Nevada, which he is favored to do, and Wisconsin and Michigan, and the second district in Nebraska, because in Nebraska they award electoral votes by district, and that second district is Omaha, which is pretty blue. If he wins those, he does not have to win Pennsylvania to get to 270 electoral votes. So that's something to really watch.
Definitely, and there's a lot of close toss-up states that a lot of people are watching. Right now, it looks like they are being favored by Trump. Why would you say you can't make a decision right now?
You can't make a decision because those three Midwestern states, which delivered barely the Trump victory 4 years ago, are not releasing their early votes very quickly at all, and it will take a day or two for that to happen. And we're talking about Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania. Without those states, there's a gaping hole, and it looks like no one can be declared a victor until we see what's happening in those states.
All right, the jury's out. Steve, thank you for your thoughtful analysis as always. It's been a little over an hour and a half since those polls closed, and there are still a lot of ballots to be counted. Let's check in with ABC 10's Andy Judson for an update on the vote counting in Sacramento County. Andy, a lot of the other reporters, there's not a lot going on, but I know it's pretty busy where you are. What are you seeing?
Hey, Mike, yeah, it's definitely not slowing down here, that's for sure. And that's because a whopping 30,000 people voted in person today in Sacramento County alone. And when you compare that with the last 10 days, it's really an incredible number because over the last 10 days, it was only 21,000. And I want to show you what happens to your ballot once it comes here, whether you voted by mail, in person, or dropping it off at that ballot. And like you said, these votes, the polls might be closed, but the workers here are not settling down anytime soon. You're taking a look at where your ballot goes. It's called the mail sorter, or what the election workers here call the Blue Dragon. And this machine is where those ballots are coming and getting sorted, and it takes a photograph of your signature as well as it cuts the ballot open, and so this is a really important part of the process. And yeah, so this is everything that's going on. We're not slowing down anytime here soon. We're going to be here all night. So are all of these election workers. They're getting ready for the next round to come out at, I believe it's 10 p.m. So we're getting close here. Then after that, it's midnight and 2 a.m. And then from there on, it's going to be every Tuesday and Friday. And they have until December 1st to certify all of these results. So we may be waiting a little bit longer on some of those local close elections. But yeah, this is where we're at. You're certainly right. It's definitely not slowing down anytime soon. We'll continue to keep you updated throughout the night. For now, I'm going to send it back to you, Mike.
All right, Andy called it the Blue Dragon, but it looks like the Pink Dragon to me. And it's my understanding that ballots can actually get there until November 20th. So, I mean, we could be waiting around a while to know final results, but we'll know most of them. All right, Andy, thanks so much.
Yeah, exactly, Mike. They have until November 20th. They'll continue to get those postmarked ballots here, and they'll continue to count them. So you're absolutely right on that.
All right, well, I hope you get some rest tonight. Thanks, Andy. And as we wait for more results, there are questions tonight about how long it'll take to get final results, as we were talking about right there, and whether some candidates will accept them. Mary Beth Moylan is the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs and Experiential Learning at University of the Pacific McGeorge School of Law, and she joins us live now. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Well, we've heard that some, including President Trump, say votes should only count if they're counted on election night. Is there a legal argument to block vote counting after election night?
No, there really is not one. There's nothing in the Constitution that requires that votes be counted on election night. There's nothing in federal law that would require that. In fact, all states have their own time, place, and manner rules for holding their elections. And as Andy was just saying, in California, we allow ballots that were postmarked by Election Day to be counted if they're received up to November 20th this year. That's a special rule because of the pandemic that the legislature passed. But all states have different rules about how long a ballot can be received after Election Day. And some of the key states that we're going to be waiting on Pennsylvania, for example, Texas, North Carolina, and Georgia, they all have due dates for their postmarked ballots that are coming up in the next few days. So we're going to have to wait a few days, even for those states to have had all of their ballots in, unless it looks like it's a mathematical impossibility for one candidate or the other to win.
And we've heard that the Supreme Court is weighing in on some states. Lawsuits are being brought before the Supreme Court, I should say. Where does the Supreme Court usually land when it comes to those decisions?
Well, that's a really complicated question. We have not had a Supreme Court that has had as many election cases as we are having this year. We haven't had a Supreme Court's decision really play a decisive role in an election since 2000 in the Bush versus Gore case. And I think there's a lot of speculation that in a particularly close race, as this one is, if it comes down to, a few 100,000 ballots in one state or another, it's possible that litigation could play an important part. I think everyone hopes that that isn't the case, and that that all the ballots will be counted and there will be an apparent victor for the presidential race and for all the races. It's not just the presidential race in which you might see an election contest or you might see litigation surrounding the counting of certain ballots.
And of course, it's a close race, so this is something that we're going to be paying close attention to in the days to come. Mary Beth Moylan, thanks for joining us. All right, let's check back in now with Brandon Ritteman. He's tracking tonight's election results. Brandon, a lot more information than we had before. It's getting exciting. What are you seeing?
We're starting to get a little bit more data in. I want to start out with Prop 15 because this one has now quadruple flipped, I guess I'll say. This was passing, then it wasn't, then it was passing, then it wasn't. But this is a business property tax increase on the ballot in the middle of a pandemic when businesses haven't been getting really as much support as they would like. So definitely.
I'm here to tell you tonight, we believe we're on track to win this election. We knew because of the unprecedented early vote and the mail-in vote that it was going to take a while. We're going to have to be patient until the hard work of tallying the votes is finished. And it ain't over till every vote is counted, every ballot is counted. But we're feeling good. We're feeling good about where we are. We believe one of the nets has suggested we've already won Arizona, but we're confident about Arizona. That's a turnaround. We also just called it for Minnesota, and we're still in the game in Georgia, although that's not one we expected. And we're feeling real good about Wisconsin and Michigan. And by the way, it's going to take time to count the votes. We're going to win Pennsylvania. I've been talking to folks in Philly, Allegheny County, Scranton, and they're really encouraged by the turnout and what they see. Look, we could know the results as early as tomorrow morning, but it may take a little longer. As I've said all along, it's not my place or Donald Trump's place to declare who's won this election. That's the decision of the American people. But I'm optimistic about this outcome. And I want to thank every one of you who came out and voted in this election. And by the way, Chris Coons and the Democrats, congratulations here in Delaware. Pardon me? Hey, John, the Gov, yeah, the whole team, man. You've done a great job. I'm grateful to the poll workers, to our volunteers, our canvassers, everyone who participated in this democratic process. And I'm grateful to all of my supporters here in Delaware and all across the nation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And folks, you heard me say it before. Every time I walk out of my grandpa's house up in Scranton, he'd yell, "Joey, keep the faith." And my grandma, when she was alive, yelled, "No, Joey, spread it." Keep the faith, guys. We're going to win this. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Your patience is great. Let's walk over here.
And good evening. Thanks for joining our special election night coverage right here on ABC 10. I'm Madison Wade. Polls in California closed just about 2 hours ago, and results are rolling in. All eyes, of course, on the presidential race, but let's look locally here. Here are some races we have been tracking. So let's start with Sacramento County District 2 for the city council seat. Incumbent council member Alan Warren, who grew up in Del Paso Heights, vying for a third term. He's held that position since 2012. And Viva Supermarkets owner Sean Loloe, who is setting the stage for an upset, leading in the count so far by 500 votes. 53% of the ballots counted so far. We're also following Measure C tonight. That is the rent control rules. A yes vote would create a new independent rent control board. The count showing Sacramento voters rejecting that measure. And you're seeing the results here that are very early and preliminary. We'll have more results coming up at 11.
Yes. Okay. We're about 5 away. Okay. Yeah.
Right now, the
Welcome back to special election night coverage, Your Voice, Your Vote with ABC 10. I'm Mike Duffy. You can track results on the ticker on the bottom of your screen throughout this broadcast. We'll check back in with Brandon Ritteman in a little bit, but for now, political analyst Steve Swat joins us live. Steve, thanks for being with us again.
My pleasure.
So let's talk about the California election results. What have you been paying attention to when it comes to the state legislature?
Well, I'm reminded of a saying by Tip O'Neill, who used to be a House Speaker. He said, all politics are local. Well, not this year. Really, all politics are national, especially with Donald Trump at the helm of the Republican Party. And his brand is taking a hit throughout California tonight. The Republican fortunes, for example, in both the Assembly and the Senate, haven't been this low since the 1800s, really. Republicans haven't won a statewide race in California for a generation. The Republican candidate for president hasn't won since 1988. Taking a look at the Senate, which right now is 29-11 in favor of Democrats, they are also right now, early on, but flipping 3 more seats, which would then give them 32 members in the 40-member state Senate. And what they're doing is they're just tying the Republicans to Donald Trump. Ling Chang, for example, a moderate Republican in Orange County, she deplored some of President Trump's language and said she never voted for him in 2016, and yet she has been tied in cable ads to Donald Trump, and she is losing tonight. There's another candidate, John Morlock, also in Orange County. He was called an anti-science Trump supporter, and he is losing. And so you can see the ability to tie these Republicans to Donald Trump is paying off big for the Democrats. In the Assembly, they have 61 out of the 80 members, and it looks like they are right now picking up 2 more seats. In the House, the U.S. House, the California delegation, which stands 45-7 in favor of the Democrats, right now is about even. There will be some changes. The votes are really early, but right now we don't see any clear movement for change right there.
Steve, another thing that a lot of people are talking about, obviously all those propositions that Californians had to vote on. What kind of trends are you noticing when it comes to those propositions?
Well, a couple of trends. One, the question you might ask, will the liberals in California, and there are plenty of them in California, will they embrace tax increases? If you go back into March when we had our primary, there were 239 tax and bond measures on the ballot throughout the state of California, and most of them failed, even school bonds and a large school bond statewide. We have a couple of tax and bond measures on the ballot tonight, and right now they're very close. Right now, voters are narrowly passing Proposition 14, which would sell $5.5 billion of bonds for stem cell research. And right now it's basically dead even. Proposition 15, which would blow a huge hole in what was Proposition 13 back in 1978 by increasing the taxes for commercial property worth $3 million or more.
Finally, Steve, we'll talk more about the presidential results in just a couple minutes, but do you have any updates for us?
The only update really is Joe Biden gave a speech in Delaware, and he said, everybody be patient. We won't know all the votes in those key states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, until sometime tomorrow or even after that. And he wanted to calm the fears of some of his supporters who were kind of worried that things didn't go quite as well as they had hoped.
All right, political analyst Steve Swat, we'll check back in with you shortly. But right now, let's check in with Lena Howland, who's watching the Sac City Council race. And what are you seeing, Lena?
Well, that's right. I'm specifically taking a look at the Sacramento City Council race for District 8. Now, this is a race with 2 candidates coming from 2 very, very different backgrounds, both vying for that District 8 seat. Now, Mai Vang, a 35-year-old daughter of Hmong refugees who sits on the Sacramento City Unified School Board and is also a native to South Sacramento, is currently leading the race by only about 100 votes as of only about a few minutes ago. That is according to the last drop of numbers from the Sacramento County Elections Office. Now, her challenger, Pastor Les Simmons, is a 42-year-old fourth-generation pastor at the South Sacramento Christian Center, and he's been well known for his social justice work across our community. He is trailing Vang by that tight number of votes. Now, this is an extremely, extremely close race. It is way too close to call right now. My Vang told me that she is nervous, but also super excited about this historic voter turnout in South Sacramento. She said, well, yes, she knows she's in the lead right now. There are still thousands more ballots left to be counted. Both candidates told me they did actually expect this race to be very close. Pastor Simmons told me these numbers show just how competitive this race is, but he is still energized and looking forward to those final results. Again, both realize that there are still likely thousands of votes left to be counted, so neither are celebrating tonight. It is possible that this race will be too close to call tonight, and we may not know the winner in this race overnight or even for the next couple of days. We are still waiting to get more numbers from the Sacramento County Elections Office, but that's just a recap of what we've learned so far. We are going to hear from both candidates in the Sacramento County City Council District 8 race coming up for you on Late News Tonight at 11. I'm going to toss it back on over to you.
All right, Lena, lots of energy, lots of votes still to be counted. Lots of times to do it. All right, so let's focus once again on the national results. We want to bring back in Steve Swat with another look. So, Steve, what are you watching right now when it comes to the presidential race?
Well, I think we're looking at Arizona because Arizona is one of those fallback states for Joe Biden. If he should fall short in Georgia, for example, fall short in North Carolina, Arizona gives him 11 electoral votes. You add that to that one electoral vote in the 2nd congressional district in Nebraska, and that's how they dole out their electoral votes in Nebraska, which he should win because that includes a Democratic Omaha. And then what is so interesting is that he does not have to win Pennsylvania as long as he wins Wisconsin and Michigan and Nevada, where he is favored to win. That gets him to 270 electoral votes, so that could mean a 270 to 268 final electoral vote tally.
And when it comes to those states that you just mentioned, Wisconsin, Michigan, those are real toss-ups right now, aren't they?
They're not supposed to be toss-ups if you believe the polls, although I will say that the pollsters have taken a little beating again tonight, especially in Florida and some of the other states. But going in, Michigan and Wisconsin especially, you may remember that ABC Washington Post poll a few days ago had Biden ahead by 17 points in Wisconsin. Now that's probably an outlier, but he's basically ahead in the polls like 8% or so. And Michigan, he's supposed to have a pretty good lead. The votes are really coming in slow. The election officials in Michigan, for example, said they're not even going to try to rush through any of these early voting absentee ballots or mail-in ballots until tomorrow. So we really have to sleep on it and see what happens tomorrow.
Okay, and Steve, the other national race that we're talking about is that balance of power in both the House and the Senate. What are you seeing tonight?
Yeah. It looks like the Democrats are going to hold on to the Senate for sure, and they might pick up some seats. Those are a little hard to figure out right now. But in terms of the Senate, just to recap, the Republicans have a 53 to 47 advantage. The Democrats have to win 4 seats, pick up 4 seats net outright to win, or they could pick up 3 if Biden wins, and then Kamala Harris becomes the tie-breaking vote in the Senate. Looks like Doug Jones, a Democrat, has lost in Alabama, so they have to now find 4 more victories. Cory Gardner, a Republican, is going down in Colorado, so that's 1. There are a few other possibilities, including Tillis, a Republican in North Carolina, who might lose. So there are still some states here in play, but it's going to be very close in the Senate.
Now, Steve, did you ever think about this scenario as it's playing out right now, where it could all come down to Pennsylvania, depending on how a couple electoral votes go? Now that some networks are predicting that Arizona will go blue tonight.
Yeah. I think the Biden campaign felt really good about Arizona, and also in the Senate race in Arizona, Mark Kelly, the astronaut, is winning there too. They felt pretty good about Arizona. What is interesting is that over the years, according to analyses, the pollsters had underestimated Democratic strength in the Southwest. And so, although Arizona looked like it was a narrow lead for Biden, right now he's ahead by 8 points. Which seems, pretty substantial. It hasn't changed much. A lot of the vote is already in, and as you mentioned, a lot of folks are calling that for Arizona. So that gives Biden a different path to 270 electoral votes. He does not necessarily have to win Pennsylvania, but he certainly would like to.
Now, a lot of people just want this wrapped up right away. How long, if you were to take a guess, is it going to be before things get wrapped up?
Well, it's Tuesday night, Wednesday morning in the East. Certainly at least 24 hours before we get a flood of these early votes in from some of these Midwestern states. And I would say probably 2 days. And I know the folks in Pennsylvania are saying they want to have really the results semi-official by Friday if possible. Although when they were dealing with these heavy votes, mail-in votes in the June primary, it took them 2.5 weeks to get all the votes in.
Some people have said that this reminds them of 2016, maybe a little bit like 2018. What does it feel like to you?
It's in between. 2018 was a huge Democratic year, and that's when obviously Democrats took over the House. They picked up 40 seats. 2016 was just the opposite when Donald Trump drew to an inside straight and he won. I mean, he carried Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin by a total of 80,000 votes. So it doesn't feel like that yet because we haven't really seen so many votes come in from those three Midwestern states. But I think there's a lot of angst on all sides.
And I think you had said it earlier, if it wasn't you, it was another guest, that the pollsters have some egg on their face right now. Why do you think the predictions were so far off?
Yeah, well, there are very complex models that they deal with. It's the characteristics of the voting public, and it's the turnout. And if they can't if they can't be perfect, then it's going to skew the results a little bit. I mean, yes, we saw, polls showing Biden ahead by 1 or 2 in Florida, for example. Trump is ahead right now. Maybe within the margin of error, and the margin of error can be plus or minus 3 or 4% for some of these times. So polling is not an exact science, and yet if you miss 2 elections in a row in some states, then you do in fact have egg on your face, and you have to sort of go back to your modeling and make sure you make corrections the next time.
All right, Steve Swap, political analyst, thanks so much for your insights on this election night. For everyone at home, if you thought you were getting a quick answer tonight, well, that's not the case. We're going to be paying close attention to how these races shake out. Thank you to everyone for joining us tonight for our special election coverage of Your Voice, Your Vote here on ABC 10. Keep it here for more election results. And I want to remind you that we'll have a wrap up of the night's election results on LNT at 11 o'clock, along with a live update at 1 a.m.
It is election night on ABC 10. We are tracking some big state results. Take a look. Prop 14, yes or no to funding more stem cell research. 52 yes, 48 no. Prop 16, yes or no on affirmative action in the Golden State. 55 no. 45% yes. Prop 21, how do people feel about more local rent control? 58 no, up to 59 now no, 41 yes. And what about Prop 22, yes or no when it comes to the Uber contractor laws? 58 yes, 42 no. Stay with us all night. We are back with the latest results at 11 on Late News Tonight and again at 1 a.m. We'll see you then.
ABC 10's special election coverage, Your Voice, Your Vote, begins now.
And we begin tonight with ballot counting well underway across our region. This is a look inside the Sacramento County Elections Office, where 2020's vote count has passed 2018.
Long voting lines have been seen across the area tonight as people rush to get their vote in before polls closed. This was the line in Elk Grove, and the race for mayor is making headlines tonight.
And 12 propositions are on California ballots this election, affecting housing and much more. We're looking at the closest races so far. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Madison Wade.
And I'm Chris Thomas. We have live team coverage tonight across several local counties, along with expert analysis. And we start tonight with ABC 10's Andy Judson live at the Sacramento County Elections Office. Ballot counting is now underway after a massive voter turnout, Andy.
Hey, Chris. Yeah, we're at the Sacramento County Elections Office, and whether you voted in person, by mail, or dropping it off in a box, your ballot comes here, and you can see that the counting of those ballots is well underway. But we did speak with election officials earlier today that told us they were surprised by the voter turnout in person.
We have seen almost 30,000 people vote just today, which is more people than we had vote in person the whole election in 2018.
And on Election Day, more people voted than over the last 10 days combined.
The majority still drop box or mail in their ballot. We did see a lot of in-person voting today.
After polls closed at 8 p.m., election officials got to work, with the first round of results being released at 8 p.m., then 10 p.m., midnight, and 2 a.m. After that, they'll be released every Tuesday and Friday at 4 p.m. These results will include those November 3rd postmarked mail-in ballots that will continue to come in. But as to when we can expect results to be certified,
impossible to know. They definitely can't be certified before November 20th because that's still the last day that we have to receive ballots in the mail as long as they're postmarked by today. So we have to wait for any stragglers.
Now, Sacramento County has until December 1st to certify all election results. So while we may have a better idea nationwide of the presidential election, it may take that amount of time to know those more closer local election results. We're going to be here all night, but for now, I'm going to send it back to you.
Something to see everybody back there counting those ballots now that they are in. We thank you, Andy. ABC 10's Van 2 is tracking several races in Sacramento tonight. Van, you have updates on two big measures on the ballot.
That's right, Chris. Perhaps the two most impactful to the city. Now, with 37% of registered voters counted so far, these are early results, but out of the gate, it appears a loud message from voters. Take a look at Measure C. A yes vote would create a new independent rent control board that would resolve tenant and landlord issues, regulate rent increases based on inflation, and provide stronger tenant protections. So far, 62% say no, 37% say yes. And Measure A, better known as the Strong Mayor Act, not doing well in these early results. 57% say no to Strong Mayor and 42% say yes. It appears these two measures will fail after contentious campaigns. Under a strong mayor form of government, Mayor Steinberg said he could quickly act on what he's heard people asking for: social equity programs, solutions to homelessness, investment in youth. But Measure A likely to fail.
If it fails, that I will wake up Wednesday morning and pursue the same agenda with the same amount of energy and commitment.
Opponents say the strong mayor proposal was rushed and not right for Sacramento.
I hope the community is speaking, and what they're saying is that they want to have a voice in this government. And so I think if this should lose for him, he'll still be a strong mayor.
In an effort to solve the housing crisis, Measure C would have established a new rent control board. Proponents said it was a hard-fought battle against special interests.
It was disillusioning to see the opposition to democracy, frankly, in the fight that we had to get this on the ballot. And just a tremendous amount of spending and misleading mailers every day against something that I think is a pretty common sense idea for Sacramento and for housing justice.
But a coalition of developers, elected officials, and affordable housing advocates said the measure had unintended consequences.
We don't need
is a kind of draconian program like Measure C, which raises fees, makes it really hard to find new housing, and eventually will drive so many people away that, you know, the rents eventually will go up in Sacramento. So it will have the opposite effect.
Again, it'll be weeks before the vote is certified. And also remember, there was overwhelming
votes as well. So this happened to us in 2000. And I remember standing there in an outdoor amphitheater in the rain in Nashville, waiting for Al Gore to come and concede. We were told that he was going to concede the election to George Bush. And we were left standing in the rain because Al Gore never showed up to concede. And it wasn't until 37 long, torturous days later that we finally learned that there would be a winner of that election. And we can only hope it doesn't take another 37 days, but we'll see.
I was there in Nashville too, and then got on a plane to Tallahassee.
That's the shot. There's no shake. No.
John, what's the over-under that Fox News comes out in this event?
What the president says, talks about Arizona?
Yeah.
You know, I think the likelihood is probably pretty high, but I've been proven wrong before. You never know where the president is going to go, but if he's got a grievance, it's a pretty good chance you're going to hear it.
And obviously, aren't in Michigan, and the decision does stand by that call and when they made it.
And you can see when you look at the calculus now why they were so instantly concerned about Arizona, because they probably had some concerns about Georgia at that same time, and they need to balance that out in order to get to 270. And you can see the camera on the door in the East Room as the president is expected to come out any moment now. I mean, unlike what we saw in 2000, you've got several states that are up in the air tonight and nowhere near any kind of conclusion as we head towards the 2:03 time tonight, Fred.
John, this is in the East Room. They had to set up there.
Yeah, there's about 400 people who were there. I was invited in to be part of what's called an expanded pool, but I've got to be out here in the North Lawn speaking to you. We were not able to do any unilateral broadcasting from inside that room, which is why I stayed out to stay with you. But
explain why they're there, because there was a battle about whether it was going to be at the Trump Hotel.
Initially, we thought that the plan was to have a group of people, this group of people at the Trump International Hotel, but Mayor Muriel Bowser of Washington, D.C. has been putting a lot of pressure on the Trump Hotel to not hold an event that more than 50 people are gathered at, because Washington, D.C. is still in phase 2 coronavirus reopening, which means that crowds have to be limited to 50 in terms of size. But here at the White House, you're able to do different things. It's federal property. It's not administered by, or at least doesn't fall into the jurisdiction of Washington, D.C. So the president was able to have more people. They thought about having it somewhere else, but the president has done a number of campaign events at the White House. There's also a campaign war room that was established at the Eisenhower Executive Office Building, which is the big building that's just across West Executive Drive from the White House. No taxpayer money, we're told, was spent on putting the campaign in that war room. The campaign took care of all of it. But here you have, it's the situation here in 2020 where we have to live by, to the best of our ability, these COVID restrictions. A lot of people would say that the president flaunted, if not violated, those rules with the airport gatherings that he had across the country with campaign rallies. But the decision was made to bring it here to the White House so as not to run afoul, at least the Trump International Hotel, of the COVID restrictions imposed by Washington, D.C.
So, John, Joe Biden came out at 12:31 this evening, a little over an hour and a half ago now, and the president was going to come out about 5 minutes ago. I mean, you have to wonder if there's ongoing discussion or what took them this long to do this at 2:05 in the morning in terms of how they're going to present their case here.
Yeah, well, I think the president might have been waiting to see if Georgia was going to be declared, and when it became clear that that wasn't going to happen because of the suspension of counting there in Fulton County, or at least a reduction in counting in Fulton County, that they probably got an argument together. And I think you're probably going to see the president lay down something of a gauntlet here in terms of the potential for, as he has been saying on the campaign trail, for weeks and not months now that the only way that he is going to lose is if the election is stolen, and maybe sort of laid the groundwork here for myriad legal challenges to the outstanding vote or these extended deadlines that we see in many states across the nation. There was a thought earlier tonight that if the president looked like he had a sizable lead in places like Pennsylvania and North.
But there's still a lot of votes to be counted. She does say she's very optimistic.
I'm feeling so humble. I can't describe it. A little bit, I feel like I'm in a dream right now, but I'm so humbled right now with the outpouring of love and support. No greater feeling. We're keeping our fingers crossed and praying, and hopefully if things trend the way they look, we'll have a wonderful outcome for our community.
Now, I spoke with Mayor Lee's campaign and Mayor Lee himself just a little bit ago, and he said that he's still waiting to see the outcome of the remaining votes. Either way, he says he's willing to accept the decision of the people as he's currently behind by roughly 5,000 votes. Still, we're expecting to have some updated numbers in this very contentious Elk Grove mayoral race within the next hour. Back to you.
Giacomo, thank you. We'll check back in with you throughout the evening. And we're going to take a look now at the Stockton mayoral race tonight. So as you can see, Kevin Lincoln up 51% with incumbent Michael Tubbs at 49%. Again, this is very preliminary information that we are getting from San Joaquin County. And ABC 10's Kurt Rivera is now joining us from downtown Stockton, where ballots are still being counted. Kurt?
They still are, in fact, Madison. This is an historic voter turnout in San Joaquin County, an extremely close race between incumbent Mayor Michael Tubbs and challenger Kevin Lincoln. On top of the Bella Vista restaurant downtown, Michael Tubbs acknowledged he was in a position he's not really used to.
I think Stockton's a very diverse city. I mean, I'm a Democratic mayor and my council's for Republicans, right? So most things in Stockton are close races. I've just been blessed with the fortune that most of the races I'm in aren't as close.
Just a short distance away, an upbeat Kevin Lincoln greeted supporters at the Ave on the Mile restaurant, confident his campaign for change struck a chord with voters.
I believe Stockton is ready to unite. Stockton is ready to come together as a community. I've seen that time and time again over this past campaign. I think Stockton is just ready for leadership.
Lincoln has never held public office and years ago lost in a bid for state assembly. But this time around, he has hammered the incumbent mayor for being too self-centered on a political career and losing sight of his electorate. It's a charge the mayor has outright denied, but has seemed to resonate with Stockton voters.
Win or lose, whatever the results are tonight, there's one thing that is for certain, is that I've fallen even more deeper in love with this city and have a deeper appreciation and gratitude for the people of Stockton.
Tubbs has criticized Lincoln for a lack of experience and not ready to take on the challenge of leading the port city. It was a much low-key affair at the Tubbs election party headquarters tonight, but still the incumbent was much more than hopeful he could win another term.
So I'm confident in the work we've done over the past 4 years. I'm confident in the way my team has organized. I'm looking forward to getting more of the ballots counted so we have an accurate picture of what's going on.
So again, an extremely close race tonight. If Tubbs wins, he says he wants to provide more COVID-19 relief to his electorate. On the other hand, Kevin Lincoln says he wants to tackle the issue of homelessness if he becomes mayor. We're live in Stockton. Back to you.
A close race we shall be watching. Okay, tonight, ABC News reports Democrats will keep control of the U.S. House of Representatives. ABC 10's Brandon Ritterman has been watching 2 local House races and joins us with more on the votes in several counties tonight. Brandon.
Yeah, Chris, I'm going to start with the race that wasn't. This one was Josh Harder was one of the big pickups for Democrats in the midterms 2 years ago. And this race really fizzled out. Ted Howes was haunted by some old social media posts that I won't repeat here, but stumbled out of the gate and will be relegated to a footnote in this race. But if we look up at the 4th, this was one Democrats were kind of hopeful about tonight and as the evening has gone on, this gap has only widened by a few thousand votes as the hours have ticked by. This is the 4th congressional district. It runs from Tahoe down the Sierra foothills, and you can kind of see it's bluer up north and then gets redder as it goes down south. There's still 15-ish% of the vote to come in here, depending on where all that's going to come from here. It could potentially sway this race, but it's starting to look pretty good for Tom McClintock, the Republican incumbent in the race.
All right, Brandon, thank you. And of course, we'll check back in with you later in the show.
And there is still a lot to cover. Next on Late News tonight at 11, 12 propositions are also on the ballot, impacting everything from housing to crime. And we are looking at some of the closest races.
And Sacramento businesses boarded up ahead of election night. We're getting an update on activity downtown.
Big changes in the forecast, cooler weather on the way, plus the latest on when we'll get the rain and snow.
And welcome back. You are watching live special election coverage right here on Late News Tonight.
That's right. As results continue to come in, we are showing updates on the bottom of your screen.
And we want to check in live now with ABC 10's John Bartel. Civil unrest has been a concern for some business owners. John, any activity in downtown?
Well, you know, it's kind of cleanup time out here at the Capitol here. Just behind us here, there was some music, there was some election results, there was even some worship. Take a look at the video we shot earlier here today. There was an event right outside the Capitol. It was put on by the Paths Ministry. This is an online religious group here. The leader tells me this was a bipartisan event, although the attendees here were largely Trump supporters. There was Trump flags being sold, hats and T-shirts and that sort of thing being sold out here. Now, I just wanted to let you know that there was also a lot of election results being released out here, along with some musical acts. It was a really a very organized event. Take a listen to some of the people that attended here.
I expected a little bit more, but I'm like, it's okay. You know, whoever came out, it's still, I'm sure it means a lot to the organizers and to everybody around here.
Now there was a group of non-Trump supporters here. They did create a little bit of a scene, but that group was actually invited up on the stage where they were allowed to voice their opinion. And all in all, this was a very mellow night out here at the Capitol. Guys?
John, thank you.
Let's get now to ABC 10's Brandon Ritterman. He has been tracking those major California propositions, Brandon.
Yeah, there's a dozen of these things, but I want to zero in on maybe the most consequential of the bunch. Prop 15 is the one we've been watching most closely all night. This is a business property tax increase, and right now it is on the losing side, but I got to tell you, this one has waffled a few times as the results have come in. We're at about 2/3 of the vote in. It'll be one that a lot of business owners are watching, especially as they're trying to adapt to COVID right now. We'll also go to Prop 16. This is the affirmative action question, sort of a gut check on how you feel about addressing racial inequality in our country, and Californians appear to be rejecting it. Now, the tricky thing about this is it would have required eliminating a guarantee of equality that's written into California's law that was already passed by voters years and years ago. So sort of an interesting debate that formed around that one. On Prop 21, this is just quickly I'll touch on, is a second stab at a rent control question that appears to be going down in flames tonight. It's the same group that tried it last time. They went back to the drawing board, came back with a new plan, and it doesn't seem the voters were any more sold on that than they were the first go around. And then Prop 22, the big money question, and it would appear that money can indeed buy you love, potentially. This is the one you've been getting postcards about all the time from Uber and Lyft that would make their drivers contractors. They have been fighting the state on this. Your legislature has passed a law to make them employees, but the drivers themselves, by a lot of polls in the industry, seem to want to stay contractors. But the thing about this is we're now set up to have an Uber and Lyft law that was written by Uber and Lyft. So that's kind of interesting. As we look, though, one other point I'll make here is the home town, San Francisco, for Uber is where it's going down the hardest, but it does appear that it is going to pass. Prop 25 is another really interesting one because this is overriding the state legislature as well. This is the legislature's law that was passed to end cash bail and replace it with a risk evaluation. The voters don't seem to have been too sold on that. There was a challenge to it, and that's why it ended up on your ballot. And I'll just quickly touch on the other crime question, which also appears to be going down. This was tougher, a whole slate of tougher criminal penalties, and it seems to be roundly rejected by California voters. Guys?
Quite the night as the results continue to come in. Brandon, we thank you for the update.
Yep, thank you.
And Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden spoke tonight. He urged his supporters to keep the faith, addressing that results in some key states like Pennsylvania will be delayed because of mail-in voting. He also expressed confidence in winning Michigan and Wisconsin. And again, breaking news, we are standing by for President Trump to speak live at the White House. This is a live look. As soon as he speaks, we will bring you that speech. Now we want to turn our attention to the national races. The presidential race narrowing down to several key battleground states, as we've mentioned. Political analyst Steve Swat joining us now live. Steve, the path for Joe Biden to possibly win. Let's talk about that. What is the scenario right now?
Well, first of all, you have to go back. Donald Trump won his must-win states, Florida, Texas, and Ohio. Georgia at this hour is still in play. He's up by 2 percentage points. About 91% of the votes have been counted, and there are a lot of outstanding votes in Democratic Atlanta. But Biden's best path to a victory, and you need 270 electoral votes to win the presidency, is to hold on in Arizona, where he leads by 6 percentage points, hold on in Nevada, where he's favored and leads right now by about 3 percentage points. He just won the Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, a single electoral vote there. That's around the city of Omaha. And then he would need to win 2 out of 3 of the remaining Midwestern states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Win any 2 of those and you win. If you
This is without question the latest news conference I've ever had. I appreciate it very much, and I want to thank the American people for their tremendous support. Millions and millions of people voted for us tonight, and a very sad group of people is trying to disenfranchise that group of people. and we won't stand for it. We will not stand for it. I want to thank the First Lady, my entire family, and Vice President Pence, Mrs. Pence, for being with us, all three of us. And we were getting ready for a big celebration. We were winning everything, and all of a sudden it was just called off. The results tonight have been phenomenal, and we are getting ready. I mean, literally, we were just all set to get outside and just celebrate something that was so beautiful, so good. Such a vote, such a success. The citizens of this country have come out in record numbers. This is a record. There's never been anything like it. To support our incredible movement. We won states that we weren't expected to win. Florida, we didn't win it. We won it by a lot. We won the great state of Ohio. We won Texas. We won Texas by 700,000 votes, and they don't even include it in the tabulations. It's also clear that we have won Georgia. We're up by 2.5% or 117,000 votes with only 7% left. They're never going to catch us. They can't catch us. Likewise, we've clearly won North Carolina. Where we're up 1.4% or 77,000 votes with only approximately 5% left. They can't catch us. We also, if you look and you see Arizona, we have a lot of life in that. And somebody declared that it was a victory for, and maybe it will be. I mean, that's possible. But certainly there were a lot of votes out there that we could get because we're now just coming into what they call Trump territory. I don't know what you call it, but these were friendly Trump voters. And that could be overturned. The gentleman that called it, I watched tonight, he said, well, we think it's fairly unlikely that he could catch. Well, fairly unlikely. And we don't even need it. We don't need that. That was just a state that if we would have gotten it, it would have been nice, Arizona. But there's a possibility, maybe even a good possibility. In fact, since I saw that originally, it's been changed and the numbers have substantially come down just in a small amount of votes. So we want that obviously to stay in play. But most importantly, we're winning Pennsylvania by a tremendous amount. We're up 600, think of this. We're up 690,000 votes in Pennsylvania, 690,000. These aren't even close. It's not like, oh, it's close. With 64% of the vote in, it's going to be almost impossible to catch. And we're coming into good Pennsylvania areas where they happen to like your president. So we'll probably expand that. We're winning Michigan by, I'll tell you, I looked at the numbers. I said, whoa. I said, wow, that's a lot. By almost 300,000 votes. And 65% of the voters in it. And we're winning Wisconsin, so we're winning. We don't need all of them. We need, because when you add Texas in, which wasn't added, I spoke with the really wonderful governor of Texas just a little while ago, and Greg Abbott, he said, congratulations. He called me to congratulate me on winning Texas. I mean, we won Texas. I don't think they finished quite the tabulation, but there's no way. And it was almost complete, but he congratulated me. Then he said, by the way, what's going on? I've never seen anything like this. Can I tell you what? Nobody has. So we won by 107,000 votes with 81% of the vote. That's Michigan. So when you take those 3 states in particular, and you take all of the others, I mean, we have so many, we had such a big night. You just take a look at all of these states that we've won tonight, and then you take a look at the kind of margins that we've won them by. And all of a sudden, it's not like we're up 12 votes and we have 60% left. We won states, and all of a sudden, I said, what happened to the election? It's off. And we have all these announcers saying, what happened? And then they said, oh, because you know what happened? They knew they couldn't win. So they said, let's go to court. And did I predict this, Newton? Did I say this? I've been saying this from the day I heard they were going to send out tens of millions of ballots. I said exactly, because either they were going to win, or if they didn't win, they'll take us to court. So Florida was a tremendous victory, 377,000. Texas, as we said. Ohio, think of this. Ohio, a tremendous state, a big state. I love Ohio. We won by 8.1%, 461,000. Almost 500,000 votes. North Carolina, big victory with North Carolina. And so we won there. We lead by 76,000 votes with almost nothing left. And all of a sudden, everything just stopped. This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election. So our goal now is to ensure the integrity for the good of this nation. This is a very big moment. This is a major fraud in our nation. We want the law to be used in a proper manner. So we'll be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list. Okay? It's a very sad moment. To me, this is a very sad moment, and we will win this. And as far as I'm concerned, we already have won. So I just want to thank you, and I want to thank all of our support. I want to thank all of the people that worked with us, and Mr. Vice President, say a few words, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to join you in thanking more than 60 million Americans who have already cast their vote for 4 more years for President Donald Trump. And while the votes continue to be counted, we're going to remain vigilant, as the President said. The right to vote has been at the center of our democracy since the founding of this nation, and we're going to protect the integrity of the vote. But I really believe with all of my heart, with the extraordinary margins, Mr. President, that you've inspired in the states that you just described, and the way that you launched this movement across the country to make America great again, I truly do believe, as you do, that we are on the road to victory and we will make America great again. Thank you, Mr.